Welcome to Paneloids, Comic Books, and More. We are joined tonight by the Reuben Award winner, Eisner and Harvey nominated writer-artist Ethan Young, here to discuss his new creator-owned series, Demon Run, available now directly through him via his website, youngillustrations.com. Ethan, thank you so much for joining us. So for our listeners, could you give us a little bit of synopsis of your career in comics?
Well, thanks for having me, Jeremiah. And you said that all so concisely. It's like you've been following me for a while, and we've been friends for a while.
That's true, yes.
I do think some people are a little bit confused when I tell them how I'm selling Demon Run. When you say pre-order, people think through a solicitation, but I decided to do something really difficult and unconventional. So my career in comics so far, I started when I quit SVA around 2002, and I started self-publishing my own comics. At the time, I was working at the Humane Society in New York City, which is where I'm from, and I ended up fostering over a dozen cats at that time, because that was just that ADD hoarding mentality. I didn't keep all those cats forever. It was foster situations here and there. I decided to make a comic about it because, you're in your early 20s and it's all you really know. And when you try to get your foot in the door, especially when you're self-publishing comics at that time, it's usually you can go one of two ways. You can all right, I'm going to try my best to try to get into mainstream comics, bringing my portfolio to every single show and allowing editors to see me, or I can self-publish something. And usually self-publishing something means something autobiographical. That's just generally how the market breaks down, as you know. So from there, I did some image stuff, and then I mainly focused on just a pretty diverse kind of freelance career. I found it very difficult to work with other people because I am really, really stubborn. Anyone who's met me knows how stubborn I am. So it became a thing where I don't want too many people to hate me. I'll just run my own freelance business. And that actually went pretty well for a long time. And then, I was doing my book Tales as a webcomic for a long time from 2009 to 2013. And around that time, I decided, well, Tales isn't going to go on forever. So I decided to work on a World War II book about the capture of Nanjing, the then capital of the Republic of China. It is something that's a big flashpoint for not just Chinese nationals, but also for Asian American stuff that relates to Asian American upbringings. It's just something you hear about. Pretty important event. And at the time I started that, I was around 30-ish. So I wouldn't say seasoned, but I think responsible and slightly mature enough at the time to take on a story of that kind of magnitude. Thankfully, I got that in the hands of Dark Horse. Oh, you pulled it out. Thank you. Wow, you got the old hardcover too.
Yeah, not only do I have the old hardcover, but if I'm not mistaken...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I do know something in that. And then fast forward, I worked on a young adult series, Battles of Bridget Lee, and that one didn't really take off. But then after that, I started doing a lot of covers, first with Boom, and then eventually Dark Horse and DC and Marvel and Image and stuff like that. My last two graphic novels were right around the pandemic, so they were both the Scholastic. One was The Dragon Path, and then I adapted the 39 Clues from Rick Riordan. Also around that time, all of this, as you know, overlaps, and I ended up becoming a character designer on Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and that show kind of just also took off. We all knew the show was going to be somewhat successful because it's Spider-Man. At least I didn't expect the younger fan base to latch onto it as much as they did. It makes sense now looking back, oh right, every generation kind of needs their own Spider-Man, especially a Spider-Man show, because that's something that kind of lives with you in your living room or on your phone for a longer period of time. You get to know the character a little bit more that way. I'm old, so to me, this is not my Spider-Man. My Spider-Man's the 90s Spider-Man. But no, I love the Spider-Man too, obviously, because I work with them. So yeah, that's been a blast. And then during that whole time, I took the character of Bridget Lee and decided to retool her into a different story, because the original sci-fi story of the Battles of Bridget Lee was just about an alien invasion and what does this futuristic medic do to protect these children. So I retooled that into a more kind of simple, singular story almost. What if this retired futuristic commander just has to go into this unknown, treacherous realm to rescue her daughter? And it also kind of gave me a license to just draw whatever I felt like. And what I felt like drawing was lots of big goopy monsters and big, huge battle scenes and stuff like that. A big part of it is, it's kind of weird at this point in my career to call this a calling card book, but in some ways it's maybe a postcard book. It's a postcard to some readers being hey, look how fucking good I am. You gotta look at this right now.
Yes. That being said, just a quick elevator pitch. What is Demon Run?
Demon Run is about a retired commander named Bridget Lee who must enter into a demon realm called Demon Run to rescue her daughter that was kidnapped by an old arch nemesis of hers. And on top of that, she also has some special abilities that you kind of learn about throughout the book.
So Bridget Lee was a character that you worked with at Dark Horse. You created her at Dark Horse. Do you need to read the Battles of Bridget Lee in order to get Demon Run?
You don't have to. But, for people who did read Bridget Lee, I think they'll find that the retooling, the rebranding as Demon Run kind of fits, I think, the tone of the character from the original series. I think that it's very, very much a nice spiritual kind of sequel. And when you tried to say Battles of Bridget Lee, I know it's a bit of a tongue twister. I fought that title a lot. Don't get me wrong. I love my editors that I worked with, but we went back and forth on the title forever. And I think there was this sense that because this was launching a new series and it's we need to really tell people what it's about. And I wanted a title that was not just a little bit simpler, but kind of sleek, something that just rolled off the tongue quicker. And look, trust me, the Battles of Bridget Lee was the best out of a lot of bad titles that were thrown out there. At the end of the day, I didn't really have the clout, and not that I have much clout now, but at the time, I definitely didn't have any clout to kind of put my foot down, being no, I do not want this title that sounds like a B movie. But that's what we ended up with.
I mean, it's a good title. It is a tongue twister, and it lets you know what's right on the tin, it says right there on the cover. So, what inspired Battles of Bridget Lee, and then the continuation of Demon Run? What brought you to those two series, technically one series?
So it was right around the time I was finishing Nanjing, and then my editor just asked me hey, what else are you working on? And at the time, I kind of was toying around with this idea of a Mulan type story. But my twist was going to be a Mulan figure kind of reappearing through multiple generations. And then I decided instead of doing a big hefty graphic novel like that, I decided to just focus on the one part that kind of stood out to me, which was futuristic Mulan. And then at the time, I think Dark Horse had published the Mulan comic because it's public domain. And then they were hey, we can't use that name. So that's why the folktale within Bridget Lee's called The Mighty One, which I actually tried to name it The Mighty One, which I know it's also not the greatest title. The best title probably would have just been Mulan. But Dark Horse at the time said, well, we can't call it The Mighty One because we have a series called The Mighty, and that might create some confusion. So it's just a lot of, moving parts that I have to deal with. But anyway, the series was a go, and I was okay, this is a grounded sci-fi story with no cursing. So they decided to, format it for children as a young adult series. And it was about this woman who these kids that she's protecting really look up to her, and they see her and they build her up as this kind of folktale character called the Mighty One. And what I really wanted to do with the series was kind of delve into the idea of symbols and stuff, and how people turn certain historical figures into symbols to fit their own needs and to fit their own agendas and stuff. And when you read the first and second book of the Battles of Bridget Lee, you can see that Bridget Lee is struggling with that because she wants to help these kids and she wants to inspire people, but at the same time, she's not really comfortable being propped up as this kind of infallible figure, because that's not what she was. She was someone who was flawed, and she was someone who was also just struggling with her role in everything. I make the story sound more serious than it is. You read it. It's just about this woman that just, goes to kick ass. Later on, years later, my kid started growing up and getting older. And you've met my son, Elliot, and anyone who's met my son knows how sweet and adorable he is. But he also has special needs. That has always been something that we've had to deal with. And not in a bad way, obviously, because we love him to death. But it is something where not just him going to school every single day and us having to organize our lives around him because, he has different therapies he goes to, different programs he goes to, and all that stuff. But as parents, we also think about his future and we worry about his future. So it was during a period, I think probably right before the pandemic or around there. A lot of ideas pop up during the pandemic because we're all just stuck indoors.
That's true. Yeah.
The idea of him growing up and me not being around to protect him anymore because he is in many ways going to be an eternal toddler the way he behaves, it kind of just kept me up at night. And you can't tell I have anxiety and I ruminate about everything. I ruminated about that nonstop. And so he came up with this idea of a story about this dad who is trying to take his special needs, his neurodivergent kid, from one outpost to another where he feels the kid can be safe. And it also took place in a post-apocalyptic world, except this time it wasn't aliens, it was demons. So I had gotten the character back, the rights to the character back. Everyone at Dark Horse was always so supportive and great. When I said, can I have the rights to the character back? They said, good riddance. Get the fuck out of here. No, I'm kidding. They said, fine, you can have it. No, God, you don't have to cut that out. But if they're listening, I love all of you. Trust me, you guys were the best. So they gave me the character back very graciously. And so okay, fine, cool. I can use Bridget Lee at the end of this book that it kind of ties into the original a series that this dad brings the kid and says, hey, can you please help the kid? Because I just don't want him to grow up in a horrible situation where he gets drafted into this war against demons and stuff. And then I had an agent, and the agent pitched it around. Certain companies were interested, but I think he differed on the vision of how the book should feel. And I think one huge thing that I think bumps a lot of heads is that I am a huge fan of black and white comics. You know that. We both love Concrete. I love like Strangers in Paradise, Bone, Xenozoic Tales, which is probably a series that not a lot of people even think about anymore. It's a great series, but you know, even at the time, like I think that you were lucky to get like one issue a year. I don't think it occupies the same space on a lot of comic book fans' heads. But you know, I'm very stubborn, and I was like, no, I want this to be in black and white. And they said, no, that doesn't sell. And I said, well, I guess I have one other option then.
But you didn't do a Kickstarter, you didn't do an Indiegogo, you didn't do a backer. What made you decide just to say, screw it, pre-order it if you want it, I'll be sending it to you? Like, what made you make that decision, other than being stubborn?
Oh, well, I was going to think of another word. I was like, I'm wildly quixotic, I guess, about stuff. Like in 2023, I had released an art book. Oh, there it is. Thank you. My God, I don't know why I have all that stuff there. But yeah, that went pretty well. Even though it didn't sell like a ton, I found that releasing it myself and kind of going through all the orders myself and packing everything myself, facilitating it just by myself, it kind of gave me like a sense of like a weird sense of peace, because even though it was hard work, I don't know, looking back, probably reframing it, I was probably miserable. My wife would probably know more than me at this point. She'd probably be like, you're lying. You were actually really miserable at that point. I was probably a little miserable, but I was mostly having a lot of fun doing it. I promise. I was having a lot of fun doing it. And so I decided, okay, this time around, since I'm doing this comic book, I don't have a ton of fans, but I do think that like the fans I have are really loyal. So let's just see where this goes. That's one. And number two, Michael Fife lived in Ithaca for a few years. Him and we became friends, and he was also self-distributing. And I think maybe after too many drinks one night when we were talking, I was just like drunkenly decided I was going to do that as well. You know, you make a lot of decisions when you're drunk. It was probably stressful, but at the same time, I think it gave me like a level of control I just wouldn't have otherwise. And I think with Demon Run, it's one of those things where I'm really obsessive about quality control sometimes. And on top of that, I feel like this gives it a much more, what's a diplomatic way to say this? This doesn't make me sound too crazy. Like a seller's touch. Like I'm communicating with you directly because you're getting it directly from me.
A personal flair.
That sounds a lot better.
It is really like grassroots comics though. Like going back to when we were just talking about the classics like Concrete, this, that, and the other, like the first issues of Savage Dragon, the first issues of Megaton were stapled by Eric Larson. Like literally in his mother's basement and stapled together by him. So like you're bringing that kind of back by doing this yourself, releasing it 100% straight through you, not through another third party of any kind. A bold move. Nothing wrong with it. It's just a bold move. So it's really, really exciting to see though. Not only is one ready, but two is ready. We're getting two issues right out the gate.
Especially since like the way I planned this book, I was like, oh, I'll make them, I'll release them as I go. But the reality is with how expensive a lot of shipping has become, even some of the cheapest options were available even 3-4 years ago, everything has just unfortunately gotten more expensive. So I feel like having a unconventional release schedule, like 2 issues at a time, I think creates a more desirable product at the end of the day. Because it's like, hey, you're not just getting one, you're getting 2 issues. It's 64 pages of content. I hate using terms like that, but unfortunately, I think that's what people are used to hearing. Like, I try not to use the term IP. I hate that term so much. But yeah, it's like, here, you're getting 2 comics, you know, as handmade as they possibly can be. Like, if I could staple all of them myself, I would.
You really would, though.
I would bend the staples myself, too. I'd melt my own metal and give it to you that way.
Emily is just spinning right now if she heard you.
Yeah, I'll probably talk to her after this. For those who don't know, Emily Swan is also a local artist here in upstate New York, and she's a friend of ours and been wonderful. She's my assistant. She's helped me with organizing a lot of this. And I'm from New York City, so I don't drive. And so she has to drive me. And I still get anxious.
I don't doubt that in the slightest. So something that we always like to talk about when you are writing or when you are drawing, what are you listening to? Do you have like specific music or podcasts that you listen into? When you're just in the zone, is it just dead silence?
No, I don't think I could function with dead silence. In terms of podcasts, I like listening to Blank Check and Fat Man Beyond whenever Kevin Smith does release it. Him and Mark Bernard are on a very weird schedule. And then in terms of shows, I need something that kind of functions as white noise. So preferably something I've seen a million times over and over again. So you don't get distracted, but at the same time, you kind of know what to expect. It's almost like it creates a comfort in you while you're working. Like a movie that I've seen probably, I don't know, 50 times in the background now is Zodiac. Act, which is my favorite movie. You know, there's a lot of great dialogue back and forth, and it's moody. Not just the performances are great, but like the dialogue is so sharp. So it's something that just creates a great drawing atmosphere. I mean, one of my guilty pleasures was this Family Guy, because that hit at just the right time for me when I was in my 20s. It's such a sophomore show, and I understand that. It's one of those shows that when I tell people that I still love Family Guy, they kind of roll their eyes a little bit. I feel like that's a show that more so than South Park, people expect you to grow out of, but it's just comforting for me.
Family Guy has so many great just one-liners that I can see just putting it on in the background and just hearing that and feeling comfortable, feeling relaxed while you're working. Something that we've talked about at a convention before. So you're working with Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and obviously you've done a lot of creator-owned stuff. Do you ever like sneaking your friends and family into your work?
Yeah, I don't do it as often as I used to now, just because when I first started with Tales back in 2000, I started drawing that 2004. It started me and my then girlfriend, and then we broke up in 2005. And so then that drastically changed the trajectory of the series. In fact, the collected edition of Tales, like Between Panels from Dark Horse, I once saw this great review of it on Goodreads where someone said, quote, like, it has this great webcomic thing where something changed in the creator's life, and so that changes the story. And I think there's something really kind of wonderful about that, because it makes it just feel so, not just so real, but it kind of brings the process of the comic making to life, you know, because it's like this comic, it's reacting to something almost in real time. And you're basically seeing how the cartoonist or the art team or the creative team is just responding to that within days, within months. That was kind of the exciting thing about doing the webcomic at the time. It's been so long since I've done the webcomic, I'm like completely ignorant of what the webcomic space is like now.
How did you end up on your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man? Did you apply to it? Did they seek you out? Just because I think a lot of people are curious how artists end up in positions like that.
So a recruiter around 2022 reached out to me, and they were very vague on Instagram. They were like, hey, I work at Marvel, and there's an opportunity that you might be interested in. So I looked at his profile, and then I just saw that he was working for Marvel TV and film. And at the time, you know, right before our call, I was like, I shouldn't get my hopes up. There's probably nothing big. It's probably just like, hey, can you do an illustration to coincide with this event or something like that? But then lo and behold, when the meeting starts, he just kind of got right to it. And it's just like, hey, do you want to draw on this show? Do you want to character design on the show? But more than anything, they were actually looking for comic artists who could match a very specific style that was established by Leo Romero, who, if anyone's familiar with his work, it's simple, but in that deceptively simple way. Like, one of the big things that Leo does is he really knows how to render fabric really well, and fabric falling over the human body. And unfortunately, that's just something that not a lot of character designers can do. It's not that they can never do it, but that's very much something that illustrators kind of focus on a lot. As you know, you can look through many comic books. Not even every comic book artist understands how fabric falls on the body. So they were looking for someone who can mimic that kind of very naturalistic, yet still somewhat abstract way of depicting fabric. And then also on top of that, mimic like Leo's style, the way he draws hair, the way he kind of shades and things like that. So there wasn't a lot of creative freedom in that, but there was obviously the opportunity to work on a Spider-Man show for Disney Plus. And, you know, the money in it is a lot better than it is in comics for the most part, which is still unfortunate, but that's a conversation for another time. So from there, I jumped in and I said yes. Like, I think I initially told them, I had to think about it for a day or so, but I think it was like that night I decided, like, you know what, this is an opportunity I can't really pass up. And before then, I had worked on Major Lazer for FXX, and that one, same deal. That was actually my first animation gig, and that one was a friend was already working on the show, and they said, hey, we actually need more comic artists here, because they needed people who could kind of keep up with the schedule, keep up with the pace. And the reality is, like, when you work as a comic artist, you're drawing maybe like half a dozen poses per page. The reality is, like, a very proficient comic artist has to be really efficient at everything. You don't have to be great at everything, but you have to at least be efficient at stuff. Like, you have to have a general sense of how perspective works, how anatomy works, how shading works, and all that stuff. You don't always have reference for everything. So a lot of it kind of comes from memory as well. So I learned when working at FXX, like, unfortunately, people who don't go through the same rigorous training and conditioning that comic artists go through, they sometimes lack certain, I wouldn't say call it a niche skill, but like, for instance, I found that like there was a lot of issues with anatomy. And on Major Lazer, I was frequently pulled from my current assignments to work on another person's assignment to fix their anatomy. And I don't mean to like throw shade at any of them, but that's just something that,
it's
like,
understandable, yeah.
So that's just the state of comic artists. are better and deserve more money.
Yeah, I 100% agree. This is a little inside baseball. I know that me and you and Emily have talked about it, but it's one of the questions that we tend to ask anyways. So upcoming conventions and signings, Demon Run tour of sorts. So I know you've got at least 2, but I know you have more conventions coming up. So where can the people find you?
The weekend of March 15th, I will be at PI, Pittsburgh Indie Expo. And then in April, I will most likely be dealing with printing and overseeing the hard copies to make sure everything goes well. Late April is a local show. So any visitors who are in and around Ithaca, please stop by. I will be at that show because I live 15 minutes away from it. So after that is Rice, which is Rochester Indie Comic Expo. That's around May. And then in June 6th, me and my buddy Emily Swan will be at Three Rivers Con in Pittsburgh again. So we're going to be in and around Pittsburgh a lot, apparently. I'm not exactly sure what July and August holds. I have applied for some other shows in September. So last year I was at IC3. Hopefully I'll be there again. I won't know how things shake up yet. Once the pre-order for Demon Run is over and I'm able to facilitate all those orders and get all that stuff sorted out, the book will officially be in stock after that. My site will open up again and like people can still just come and get the book. And anyone who's ever ordered from me can tell you that like I'm on top of things. I don't let things slide.
Yeah.
You're not going to wait weeks and weeks for something. I mean, unless you live on the other side of the world, then unfortunately you will have to wait weeks and weeks for stuff.
So you haven't fully decided on the first weekend in August then, because Terrificon.
I think I'll be at Wellsboro, actually.
I thought so, yeah. Wellsboro
gosh.
Comic-Con.
I really wish they were on the same weekends.
I really want to get you out to Connecticut.
Well, you know what? Hopefully next year you and I can go to Connecticut and I'll make an honest man out of you in Connecticut.
And it's recorded, so now you have to. That is a wrap for Paneloids. Ethan, thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to go to his website, Young Illustrations, to pre-order your copies of Demon Runs issue 1 and 2, available for pre-order until April 3rd. And will be released in May 2026. Ethan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys. And also, if you can't remember the name of the site, just Google my name. I've Googled myself so much that I've gained the SEO. It's almost impossible now for any other Ethan Young to, I guess, go up in the standings of the SEO. I'm going to Google myself 50 times tonight just to kind of be in preparation.